time to do the end block for the guitar, the bit that goes on the end. And because of the shape of guitar that I've chosen, this isn't going to be straightforward, but I think it's going to be fun. We've got to carve the shape into a piece of wood, and I'm going to use the router for that. But first, I've got to get some wood squared up and laminated, because I don't think this is going to be quite thick enough to get this done. So let's go do that. I guess this next section could be called Fun with Router Bits, because there's a number of routing operations I've got to do here. I have a reference edge here. You'll notice the rest of this is quite crude. This is our end block, obviously. Like, well, I say obviously. This is a reference edge. This is square. I made sure that was the case when I was preparing the timber. I've got to get these edges flush here. They're not quite flush, and I'm going to use the flush trim router bit. Just to get everything there, and then the whole thing will be square. At the moment it wobbles very slightly, well, hardly anything, but I've got to get that all flush. And then we have to route a curve into this edge. This curve here. Except that this is the outside curve of the guitar. We want to route the inside curve, because clearly the end block is going to be sitting on the inside of the guitar, and it's not good enough to have this edge routed onto the end block, because the radii will be different. If we're 2mm back, thickness of the sides, back from this edge, this curve will not fit that profile, because these radii will be different. You'll see this as we go on, I think. So what we need to do is we need to create another template which is 2mm back from this curve, and I'm going to use this scrap to do this, and I'm going to use a rebate bit. Now I need to swap this bearing over, because at the moment this is a 4mm rebate, and unfortunately this bearing would give a 2.5mm rebate, which is just a little bit too much. This one gives a 1mm, and I don't have a 2mm rebate bearing. So I will have to do 2 passes of this and use a flush trim router bit, and hopefully this will all become obvious. I think the easiest way to do this is to just do it rather than explain. That's now given me a 1mm rebate. So what I will now do is I'll dismount this and go over it again halfway up to create a an extra 1mm rebate, 2mm in total, and then trim it with a flush trim using the new edge. I'll show you. I am now 2mm back from the edge of the original template. The edge here was catching, I hadn't taken enough off on the table saw. Hopefully now we can get right in and get a perfect contour. If you're wondering what bits I was using, wonder no more. These are Radian bits, quite expensive, but definitely worth paying the money to get the finish. This is well, actually, I think this is almost as expensive. This is a Trend, what I call a binding cutter, rebate cutter. and that's what I was using to get my 2mm rebate, although as I explained this is a 1mm rebate as it's set here. It will do 1mm, 2.5mm and 4mm rebates. On the face of it I got a really good finish on this, but there are a couple of issues. These are not burn marks, I don't think. I think these are oil marks. I should have wiped the bit before I started. Oh well, that should clean up nicely. But I have a slight ridge in the middle. Something wasn't quite vertical or square about my setup, and I suspect it could have been my square block. Isn't as square as I thought it was, although it measures square with the engineering square I've got, but maybe that could be better. This was hand prepared by me planing it, so that we're talking fractions of a millimetre here, or possibly a 0.5 millimetre in total. I am going to try and sand this ridge out, and I'm going to have to be very careful because I want to preserve the contours. So I'm going to preserve the two edges, which I know to be true, and just try to sand across between them. And I'm going to be very careful about this. Just going to put masking tape on the edges to stop me sanding there. And I'm going to use 3 layers of masking tape. So that's fine for the outer curves here, but for the inner curve, let me introduce you to my large curved sanding block. So I'm going to apply some sandpaper to that. Yeah, this is really highlighting this very slight step here, so at least I'll know when I'm finished. This is probably going to look weird at the edges, but maybe not. So that's now nice and straight. Next thing to do is to plane a 92-degree angle top and bottom. This is because the top, well, both top and bottom are domed in effect. That actually looks pretty good. That seems to be spot on. That's the angle done now. So I've just got to get it to dimension of about 1 millimetre off. now got that dimension properly. That's 102mm across there, and hopefully you can see the angle I've got, which is sloping up into the belly of the guitar. That would work as an end block, but one final refinement I'm going to do is I'm just going to remove material from each end just to take a little bit of the weight away while maintaining the strength, so that the block is curved round. Well, that went really well, but boy, that router's scary. It was fun, but you have got to be so careful when you've got such a large router bit, because it will grab if you try to take too much wood away in one go. I had a tiny little bit of tear out there, but that doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. It's barely visible, but it is there. At the time when I did this, during my commentary, I don't think I mentioned why you've got the same angle top and bottom of the end block, and it's really almost a coincidence. The back of the guitar is domed quite considerably, much more so than the top. The top's just got a very gentle curve in it, but the back has got a more pronounced curve. So you'd expect the angle on the bottom of the block to be much bigger than the angle on the top block, but of course, what I hadn't realised when I was doing this, perhaps I could have explained while I was doing it, the back tapers. The body end, the neck end of the body is much shallower than the tail of the guitar, and so you've got this taper on it which reduces the angle on the bottom. So it just happens to be a coincidence, I guess, that the angle is the same top and bottom. On the neck block, which I'm going to do next, the angles are much more pronounced. At least they're very much different. I think the top is 1 degree and the bottom's 3 degrees. I might have that wrong though. But I'll be covering that in the next video, so stay tuned, and that will be coming along soon. So make sure you're subscribed, do all the usual things, click like, share the video, comment as you always do, and we'll see you for that next video. Bye.